Hello, welcome to Travel Studies series. In this particular lecture of the series, we are going to cover travel health as a particular context of India. As you know, travel health is a major discourse in present scenario in India, and this particular lecture will focus on this broad aspect of travel health in Indian context, with a major focus on the particular context of socio-cultural health. And in this process, another major aspect will also be the demographic pattern of Indian tribes in present context. So, in this, before going to the lecture, I would like to introduce myself. I am Dr. Shubhendu Kumar Acharya. I am a scientist in a regional medical research center working on social and behavioral health aspects in a particular Indian context. So, in this particular lecture, I will briefly I'll introduce the various sections that I am going to cover. So, we will look into the different perspective of health, and before going to those perspectives, I will give a brief introduction to the Indian tribal context, then tribal depopulation and the demographic decline pattern, how it is happening in Indian context. Then the triple burden of non-communicable diseases will be the focus of this particular tribe with respect to NCDs like undernutrition, overnutrition or malnutrition, cardiovascular diseases and hypertension. And I'll look into the various aspects of socio-cultural perspective like gender, poverty, social perspective, nutrition like aspects. And towards the next part of this lecture, I will look into the barriers of health among tribal society and socio-cultural perspective of health among Indian tribal scenario also. And at the end, I will give a perspective to the particular present context of tribal health. If you look into the world scenario, there are 370 million indigenous or tribal groups living worldwide, and they are living in 90 different countries, making roughly 5% of the world population. But most importantly, 80% of this whole population live in China, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. As we know, India is a major country in the South Asia, and the second most populous country in the world. So the tribal population accordingly also is a huge in India. So the tribal population in India, as per the census 2011, is registered as 8.6%, 6% of the total Indian population, or in number it is approximately 10.2 crores out of 130 crore, more than 130 crores general Indian population. Before going to the next slide, I will just give a very brief idea of the tribe, how we define tribe in Indian context. The tribe, as per the Constitution of India, the tribes or indigenous tribal population are defined in a very typical administrative term like scheduled tribes, which is in the term like within quote, tribes or tribal communities or parts of the groups within tribal communities which the President of India may specify by public notification. This is the administrative or political definition of tribe. But anthropologists or social scientists in different contexts define Indian tribes in a more holistic point of view. So the anthropological aspect of tribes in India defines them as the people living in mostly geographic isolation with a unique culture, common descents, with a continuous territory and specific attachment to their land, strong kinship ties within the community, common language and specific taboos within the society, certain specific religious beliefs which are specific to their communities or society, common political organization, and customary laws, particular activities or material possessions that differentiate themselves from other communities as well as mainstreams. So within this whole concept of Indian tribe, there is another subdivision with respect to administrative and developmental perspective we have defined, that is PBTG, that particularly vulnerable tribal groups. And these PBTGs or particularly vulnerable tribal groups are defined as, with respect to, are the most backward groups within this whole marginalized group of tribal society, tribal communities in India. They are defined as the community which are pre-agricultural level of which practice the pre-agricultural level of technology, a stagnant or declining population, extremely low literacy, and a subsistence level of economy. So these PBTGs in India, with respect to these PBTGs in India, there are totally 75 numbers of PBTGs in India as per the census 2011. So tribal groups are culturally very firm with a strong magico-religious healthcare and belief system, and mostly outreach populist groups. So depending upon geographic locations, locations in India, the whole India has been divided into 7 distinct regions of with respect to tribal concentration. One is Northeast region that includes Arunachal, Meghalaya, Mizoram like states. Then Eastern region, which includes Odisha, West Bengal, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Bihar like states. The North region, Jammu Kashmir, Uttarakhand, Himachal, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan like states. Central region is Madhya Pradesh. Western region comprises of Gujarat, Maharashtra, Dadra, Nagar Haveli, Goa, Daman and Diu. And southern region comprises of Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh and islands like Andaman, Nicobar and Lakshadweep. So if we look into the total tribal scenario in India, there are 808 tribal groups in India as per the 2011 census. So if we look into the historically, in 1981 the number of tribes was 557. So in the process of this whole 4 censuses, or in the process of censuses, the number of tribes have increased. So this increase of the tribal scenario shows that there are new groups have been added into the whole tribal population in different time. But if we look into the number of tribes, like I give you one example, like Santal. Santal lives in several states. So in each state, Santal is identified as a separate tribe. So if we identify Santal as one tribe and calculate the number of tribes in India, in whole India, so the number of tribes will be 423 as per the census 2011. So all these tribes are in a different level of development in the whole process. Some are there still in the form of food gatherer and hunterers like Birhor, Kadar, Chenchu, Hilkaria, Juang, Mankriya like tribes. Some are still in the shifting cultivation level like Khasi, Naga, Kandh, Saura like tribes. And some have already shifted to modernization like Santals, Bhils, Mina like tribes in different parts of the country. Now coming to, I'll shift to the next part of the lecture like that I briefed in the beginning, that is the demographic pattern or the demographic issue with respect to tribes in the present context. The demographic aspect of the tribe, why I put in this lecture is, now the Indian tribes are facing a real problem of demographic declination or depopulation in present context. It's a very constant state. A single statistics will give you the pattern. So if we look into the census 2001, the percentage of Indian tribes was 8.2% of the total Indian tribes. And in 2011, that percentage increased only into 8.6%. So there is only 0.4% growth in tribal population. If we look into the general population growth in this period of census, it was around 17.7% in general Indian context. So such a stagnant state of growth in many tribes, a decline or depopulation in many tribes with a very marginal growth in certain tribes. So we look, there is this particular context, I'll brief in this particular slide in a very subtle manner. So Indian population groups in major countries, if you look into the indigenous population, I'll just give a brief to this history to this particular declining pattern of tribal population. If we look into the indigenous population around the world, like Western countries, Latin America, Asia, Africa, like different countries, they have faced depopulation historically. And the primary reasons has been due to chronic and communicable infectious diseases, starvation, heavy external colonization, high interference, cultural disruptions, and many things which have affected their day-to-day life. Evidences in certain cases have shown that the indigenous population in developing countries, somehow certain tribal groups have stabilized in the process of development, which still lacks in evidence. But the context in the conditions of developing and least developed countries is very worrisome, where several of the tribes are facing steep decline. A concerning trend of depopulation among Indian tribes, both among minor and major tribes. That's the major issue. So we recently looked into how these things are happening in Indian context. So we looked into the tribes who are with smaller population, like less than 10,000, and those tribes which are having a population of more than 10,000. And we found that around about 62 tribes out of 337 small tribes are facing depopulation in their overall level. And similarly, among major tribes that are more than 10,000 that we defined in our analysis, and we found that around 140 tribes of 393 larger tribes are facing depopulation. And most important, what is more serious is the 0 to 6 age of tribal population. 0 to 6 age group of any population is very important because this defines the future of the population. So the 0 to 6 population in in the minor tribes, the tribes of a smaller population, in that context, around 85 numbers of tribes out of 37 tribes are facing depopulation or declining trend. And same, that 0 to 6 population with respect to 0 to 6 population, 173 tribes out of 393 in major tribes are facing depopulation. So if we look into the same in the PBTGs, that particularly vulnerable tribal context, around 75% of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups are facing 0 to 6, declining in the 0 to 6 tribal population, with around 29% in the overall population. So this is a very precarious condition of population decline among Indian tribes, which needs a immediate address. But most importantly, when we look into the various possible causes, there are very less evidence with respect to that, which needs an immediate address. In this analysis, we also saw a very typical trend. Two trends I would like to highlight here. One is the 0 to 6, the young adolescent population, another the post-50 population. So we found that normally tribal population are the traditional wisdom is tribal population are celebrated that the gender equity, the gender equality, and the better sex ratio. So we found that in the 0 to 20 or 0 to 18 population, which is the adolescent and young population, there's a huge gap in male and female population, which is clearly visible. So though tribal population are identified with that there is no swan preferences or there is no male-female differences or discrimination, but these data shows a very different structure, having no explanation. In the next, that is, and in this particular 0 to 21 years analysis, we found that the male population is higher than the female population. When we go to the post-50 group, we found just a reverse trend, that the male population is declining in a very rapid rate and female population is dominating the male population. So this scenario in the post-50 context implies towards a more social insecurity, as male population as per the Indian system are the majorly income generating groups, and they are mostly taking care of the society. So this particular typical problem needs a very systematic address, which at least at this present context has no substantial evidence to address. So in the next scenario, though I will look into the particularly the non-communicable diseases, but with respect to socio-behavioral aspect, tribal population in India are the marginalized among the marginalized. They stand in the farthest in the margin. So they are burdened with all sorts of non-communicable diseases, infectious diseases, inherited diseases like hemoglobinopathies, as well as the recent trend of communicable diseases or like lifestyle diseases. So before going to that, I will just say that the burden of infectious diseases and hemoglobinopathies has been huge among Indian tribes. Though it has the trend of researchers among Indian tribes has come in 90s, particularly the trend picked up, but it still has a long way to go. So without looking into those infectious aspect or the inherited disease aspect, I will directly go to the non-communicable disease or lifestyle diseases, which is a recent trend among Indian tribes and which is a major focus in recent context. So Uh, Indian tribal population are experiencing a phenomenal change on the social, cultural, and in their economic front in last, we can say, 3 to 4 decades. Like all developing countries, large-scale development activities and urbanization in India have brought significant change in the lifestyle, occupational pattern, and dietary habits of these tribal communities. Once consider which are mostly outreach groups. Further, new urban centers have also developed quickly near rural and urban areas where tribal habitats are there. As the health issues of tribal infants and their children are mostly the focus of the public health program or public health system, these non-communicable diseases that are mostly the issues of the adults and elderly has long been neglected in various contexts, and which mostly cover the public health problems of degenerative diseases like diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular diseases, hypertension, cancer, all these things. So a considerable large burden of this socioeconomic disadvantage is reported among Indian tribal population, and though these non-communicable diseases have previously been identified as the result of overnutrition or obesity due to the affluence of food, but in tribal context it is a very typical paradoxical situation where both undernutrition and malnutrition, which is or overnutrition or obesity, which is a very recent trend, exist at a same time. That is a double burden. So this double burden of undernutrition, I'll just make a brief to this particular scenario. So undernutrition has been a major health concern of Indian tribes. As per the National Family and Health Survey 2003, which was conducted in 2005-06, and in the recent, which was concluded in 2016, the prevalence of undernutrition varies from 40 to 50% among Indian tribes, and women are the mostly disadvantaged group among them. So, despite of various developmental activities throughout the India, these things are happening among the Indian tribes with respect to undernutrition. But at the same time, there are a certain section of the tribal groups which are also moving to the modernization or urbanization pattern, accessing the developmental or economic activities, getting facilities of the all affluent lifestyle and various changing pattern, and they are getting access to this new lifestyle, and as a result of that they are becoming vulnerable to various metabolic risk factors. So how it is happening, I will explain in the next few minutes. So this apparent shift in the this whole idea of health from the traditional wisdom that tribal people do not face any lifestyle disease. As I was telling that undernutrition is a major concern in tribal population. Previously, we were thinking that undernutrited people are not affected by the lifestyle diseases like hypertension, obesity, cardiovascular diseases, cancer, like things. But the recent studies in Asian context showed that people with low body mass index is the standard accepted index of good health. So people with low body mass index, though in tribal society, though they are undernutrited, due to the changing lifestyle pattern, they are having intra-abdominal fat deposited in the body, and which is increasing the risk of various cardiovascular issues within themselves, within those populations. So as you can see in this slide, that this particular slide shows the double burden of malnutrition among Indian tribes. So you can see that there is, if we look, in this particular analysis, we have taken body mass index, waist to height ratio, and body fat at the body fat percent as the three different parameters, and all the three parameters show that there is a huge burden of undernutrition as well as obesity. This two double burden is visible in this particular tribal scenario. This second slide that is visible in the scene, we analyze a 30 years trend of BMI among Indian tribes. So as well as the national Indian population. You can see that the BMI among Indian general population from 1980 to around 2009 has increased or has been improved over a period of time. But if we look into the tribal scenario, which is presented as three dots, like male, female, and total, it is visibly is very, very low from the general Indian population. But on the other end, when in this slide we see the mean blood pressure, the 30 years trend of systolic blood pressure of the population. The systolic blood pressure is mostly is a better indicator of trend of risk of hypertension or cardiovascular issues in the population. So here we analyze the from 1980 to 2009, the whole 30 years trend of systolic blood pressure in the Indian population. And you can see in this slide that this trend shows that the systolic blood pressure over a period of these 30 years has stabilized, whereas it has hugely high among the Indian tribal population. So the scenario is like there is a huge burden of high undernutrition and increased state of systolic blood pressure or the risk of hypertension. So this alarming trend is visible. It was first visualized in 1990s when the first study by Gopalan came, where he reported the prevalence of 2 to 3% overweight among Indian tribes. And recently, we found in our study in a large scale tribal population in India that there is a 2 to 3% that overweight has shifted to obesity, and there is a 11% overweight, more than 11% overweight in Indian tribal population. And this scenario has also been observed in different other studies. With respect to similarly hypertension, we observed there is a 40%, more than 10%, 10 to 12% hypertension in the studied tribes. And when a previous study by Rizwan et al., meta-analysis, they reported that there is a around 16% prevalence of hypertension with a very considerable heterogeneity, like different tribes have different patterns of prevalence of hypertension. There is no common pattern. Similarly, NNME, National Nutrition Monitoring Bureau, they reported the prevalence of hypertension is 25% among men and 23% among women, which is very high than these two studies. So the prevalence of obesity is also a major issue which was not previously reported in a very number of studies. This is a very typical context. So we identify this as a triple burden of disease among the Indian tribes. So this triple burden of disease among Indian tribes, the undernutrition, obesity, as well as the hypertension. In this whole process, a very typical scenario is coming, the women, the gender issue. So we found that there is a high undernutrition among the women, and at the same time, women are at par with men with respect to hypertension or CVD risk. So they are the most vulnerable to various lifestyle diseases. And when our analysis in this particular slide shows that the women, an overall scenario of tribal context, are around 2%, around 2 times more prone to be undernutrited. And in elderly age group, they are more than 3 times more prone to be undernutrited. And this prevalence of undernutrition among the tribes among the women, both from less than 40 years and more than 40 years, is very huge, and it can be seen from this particular slide. So a high undernutrition among the tribal women, which explains their probable suffering from stunting and wasting in their childhood, that has continued to the adolescent and further to the young and later age of their life. Additionally, most tribal women get married in an early age and attain motherhood. So their malnourishment-driven ill health gets continued to their motherhood. Young women suffering from undernutrition and ridden with other risk factors like early age marriage, poverty, illiteracy are at the increased odds for their children towards developing the stunting and wasting in the twofold risk. So undernutrition among women and their children, when left unaddressed in one generation, may get carried on to the next generation, forming a very typical vicious circle which leads to a gross breakdown of the health of the community, leading to a high prevalence of nutritional extreme among the community. Nutritional extreme is defined as, in one side there is a high prevalence of undernutrition, and in the other side there is increased pattern of obesity, two extremes in the community. So it will be worth mentioning here that the male members of the studied tribes were observed to have an easy access to work or income generation, whereas women are mostly confined to the household work. So that may be the one of the reason why due to the lack of access to money or economic a better economy, so women may be in a lagging end of the better health. So now coming to the next part of this particular lecture is urbanization and changing lifestyle in the tribal context and how it is leading to the disease with respect to non-communicable disease. So recent evidences indicate that extensive urbanization, which is associated with the modernization, and which is a strong risk factor for cardiovascular diseases, is happening around the world. So major tribal dominated states such as Maharashtra, West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, which are the major dominated states in India, are experiencing high rate of urbanization with more than 20 to 30% increase in urbanization pattern. And at the same time, there is a increase in shift from rural to urban, along with an increase in literacy in the rural area than the urban area. So the urban population experiencing high population growth have exhibited a broader shift in lifestyle changes, including the structure of diet as well as of physical activity. In this process, rural and tribal populations are increasingly gaining better access to information, to various sources of food products, entertainment in their neighborhood, which plays a pivotal role in their availability, accessibility, and affordability to ranging from lifestyle changes to food habits. So a brief explanation to their changing food habit and nutrition in this particular scenario, I would like to say. So among medium and low human index countries like India, there is an increased tendency in the society towards globalized food market. This is a particular context of Indian tribal scenario, how the Indian tribal nutrition transition is happening. While various processes and packaged food are increasingly becoming a very popular and a prestige symbol. So effects of such nutritional transitions weighs heavily on the lower socioeconomic strata of the society. This globalization-driven nutritional transition with the drastic change in food habit further defends the status of nutritional inequality among the rich and the poor. And here the poor are the tribals. So the poor are the worst affected by the cultural convergence towards the low quality of diet, and they cannot afford the better quality of this fast food or junk food or changing food pattern. Which are mostly involve the inexpensive vegetable oil and trans fat. Therefore, providing mere nutrition, as we look into the present health scenario, the nutritional literacy or dietary information, accessibility to dietary information are mostly focused at as the major pattern to address the better health, which is not as visible from the field condition, is not the only practice which can improve the better health among the Indian tribes. So now, looking into the broader picture of this changing lifestyle, I'll put it in this way. Like the first thing is the high urbanization or modernization that I already told. The second is the second major aspect is the subsidized food or the supplied food by the government. There's an increased pattern of subsidized food supplied to the tribal population, which is also associated with the distending of the tribal population from their traditional food basket, like that naturally they were having previously. So there is their traditional food basket is being disturbed in one end, and they are being dependent on the public food assistance program. Studies found that the restricted diversity in the diet, which was previously available with the tribal population, is strongly associated with obesity and other comorbidity factors of lifestyle diseases among particularly women, which has been seen among the other part of the world. So this shift from the traditional enjoyed food sovereignty to shrinking food basket with a high dependency on the supplied food or public distribution system is another major issue among the Indian tribal population. The third thing is that I'd like to highlight here the socio-cultural economic development aspect in the tribal context. So the indigenous groups in the Indian society, they are previously have their cultural habitat, their cultural natural setup, but with the process of development that has been disrupted. So factors like social marginalization, economic exclusion, then this cultural and economic disruption, displacement and rehabilitation, these are all various aspects that have come in the process and have affected the tribal socio-cultural and economic milieu in a very severe form. So a study in among the Saharia tribe in Madhya Pradesh have found that there is a yearly aging among the tribes, and they found that this yearly aging is a result of the displacement, that the tribe was displaced from one place to another due to a developmental activity, and in the rehabilitated place there is a huge stress or distress, economic disruption, cultural disruption among the community, and they feel insecure in the society. And the effect of this scenario is such a high among the tribal population is that is affecting their the lifestyle and living as well as their health. So these scenarios are leading the tribal population into a very serious health condition which needs to be looked into more holistic point of view. A recent WHO report said that the indigenous people around the world are more likely to remain poor in comparison to other population. So we why I am telling all these things are also to be looked into while we are looking into the to address this particular scenario. It is because studies have found that poor and indigenous or ethnic minority, being a person, if he or she is a poor, or a community which is affected by poverty, and they are being indigenous or ethnic minority, that increases the risk of premature death by 3 times than the other community in the society. So poverty, which is a major socio-cultural issue, as I have already told before, that gender as being a woman. So poverty is the second and another major issue among the tribal population, or which has already observed as the independent single risk factor for the death, is a major problem among the Indian tribes. And here I would like to highlight that Indian tribes constitute 50% of the lowest strata of the economic condition of India, and they constitute 85% of the 2 lowest economic quartile in Indian population. So this sort of economic exclusion of Indian tribes is a serious concern for their overall health as well as general development. So considering this interrelation between poverty, undernutrition, malnutrition, social marginalization like issues, we have to look into the general health of the tribal population. So previous studies have found that hypertension and CVDs as critical adverse health outcome of this type of interrelated scenario. And increased prevalence of hypertension among undernourished and obese men as well as women is a typical outcome of this type of scenario, and this has already been observed in other countries in the world, as well as also evidence are available in Indian scenario. So coming to the last part of this series, this lecture, I would like to highlight certain aspect with respect to socio-cultural beliefs and practices with respect to tribal health in the present scenario. So, socio-cultural beliefs and practices play a crucial role, still they are playing a crucial role in the tribal health and health-seeking behavior. There are at least 100 shamanistic performances that has been recorded in the family-related ritual in central India. Similarly, social structure, kinship system, politico-religious practices or hierarchy play a serious role in tribal health-seeking behavior. And the other aspect is in certain social beliefs or practices that are still there, like witch hunting. Witch hunting is a major problem. If you look into this particular aspect, how the society is affected by different social vagaries and how we can look into, and these things combinedly define the context which needs to be addressed. So, witch hunting is defined as the biggest organized crime among the Indian tribal societies, And in consistently in National Crime Record Bureau, it shows that there are a huge number of or a large number of witch hunting cases or murders are coming up. So cultural ways of tribal community to address health and illness also very different. So in this all this context, we have to look into the tribal health as in a larger scenario. So previously tribal context, tribal health which, or the cultural perspective of health was more functional, that as we observe in the tribal context. But the medical system or the modern system identified the health as a more physical or clinical system. So now the tribal health is shifting towards that. So we have to look into the, so in this context, in the transition process, we have to look into this tribal health prospect in a more serious manner. So as per our observation in previous studies in Indian context, we have seen that the burden of cultural transition and urbanization among tribal youth as well as the elderly is huge. And there is a big generation gap. So when addressing this whole scenario, we have to look into the generation gap, because there is no support system in the society, or no substantial support system in the society to address or stabilize these changes. A very typical example I'll give here, as we studied in Tamil Nadu, we found that there is a large-scale infertility in a particular tribe called Mudhuban. When we investigated, we found that there is abundant use of oral contraceptive among the tribes, particularly among the unmarried and adolescent women. And we found that that is due to only to avoid the menstruation, the menstrual period. And the women just wanted to constantly shift the period so that to avoid various cultural and societal practices that are there from ages. So these type of changes that the young or new generation is adopting in the society, there is no system to support this. So the system, the society is suffering a lot. So we have to look into all these aspects when we are looking into the tribal health as a national perspective. So coming to last part of this lecture, I'll conclude it with the perspectives. So the perspectives are various. Health is a very huge aspect, and in the particular context, we have to of population decline and the non-communicable diseases in the context of urbanization, changing lifestyle, changing food habit, all these things. We have to look into the various certain major aspects like gender, poverty that I have already discussed, nutritional transition and the pattern or the system, how it is taking this transition and various factors affecting the transition, the whole idea of urbanization or the modernization and how it is happening and its relevance to and how it affects the health, and lifestyle changes. And this lifestyle changes is a very huge and major issue, major aspect that needs a extensive observation or understanding. Then socio-cultural disruption and habitational displacement is another bigger issue which has not yet extensively studied from the health point of view, which needs a lot of focus. So coming to the NCD or non-communicable disease perspective, there is a rather than evidence creation, along with evidence creation, we also need to look into regular screening, because NCD is no more a very uncommon issue in the tribal societies. It has become a huge problem in tribal population in several parts of the country in recent time. So rather than going for evidence building, we need a regular screening of NCDs. Along with, we also look into, the health system needs to look into the management, to create some management program with unbroken, undisrupted prevention activities or support system for management of these particular conditions in the tribal areas. So at the end, there are certain issues we can look into which are still neglected in the tribal context. There is high heterogeneity in the prevalence of and prevailing status of undernutrition at intertribal level. A tribe-wise approach in addressing such issues will be very important. It is desirable to prioritize to address such health issues which focus on marginalized tribe particularly. As I have told that the declining context of the tribe is very huge among the small tribal population rather than the major population. So marginalized tribal population needs a major focus. So empowerment of the community, empowerment from the community perspective in nutritional security program and encouraging community level initiative will bring very successful results. So strengthening the nutritional supplementation program of the adolescent will bring a very encouraging result also. Pre-age marriage and early pregnancy are the major issues that we need to address. The strengthening the maternal and nutritional health, particularly of young mothers, holds the key. Additionally, studies focusing on various aspects of undernutrition, particularly among the geriatric. The geriatric nutrition or undernutrition is a totally unexplored and neglected area with respect to tribal population. Explanation in behavioral and socio-cultural aspect with respect to health among the Indian tribes is a huge vacuum which needs to be looked into. And at the end, there is no explanation yet to the issue of depopulation or population decline among the tribe, as I have told previously, in a very steep manner, and we don't yet find any substantial comprehensive evidence to this particular scenario, which needs an immediate address. So with this, I think though this tribal health is a very big context, I would conclude this particular lecture, and I think it will be helpful and thought-provoking for the audience.